We're just recapping this game, but obviously the sidebar story for us is the loss of Chris Tanev. Do you think that impacts how Toronto navigates the deadline here?
Well, yeah, it will if it's a significant injury. If he's out long term, then it's going to be a bit of an issue, obviously for Treliving and the Leafs, and they're going to have to kind of readjust a little bit. I guess what is it? We're getting word later today, I guess officially, as to the status of Chris and if it's going to be long term, how serious it is, and then they got to you kind of go from there. But better to happen now, 9 days before the deadline, than a day before or 2 days before when you have to pivot and some options may not be available. You have to kind of readjust. Maybe you've already made a move, so it's wait and see mode. But you got to be, you got to do your due diligence, all that stuff, and make sure that you've got options available to you if Tanev is out for an extended period of time.
And obviously, everyone kind of knows they're looking at a depth center and a right-handed defenseman, and almost like
Yeah.
more emphasis has been put on that centerman for quite some time. Do you think that squarely just makes him start to, shift almost all of his attention for the time being on that right-handed D-man, with Tanev being down, whether he's back in X amount of time or not? That was already a need. Is that the number
Yeah.
one priority now for Tree?
Only if Tanev is out long term. I still think they'd like to bring in somebody capable of playing the 2C, or at the very least a second line. Like I've still heard that while they would like to get somebody at the dot, they're still looking at options on the left side, and then just keep Tavares at center. And this was something they started looking for at the beginning of the season too, just to kind of see what their options are. So I think they've cast a bit of a wide net in terms of getting somebody capable of playing the second line. Player may end up being a third line guy, but somebody kind of interchangeable. I still think that's where they're at, but obviously, Rosie, like the blue line will be a matter of concern if, I think more so if Tanev is out, long term. Then they adjust and make a bigger splash on D, or try to anyway. Alternatively, if he's back, you still kind of look to make an addition up front and then see if you can find somebody that has playoff experience, capable of playing playoff minutes, if he needs to be slotted in on the back end.
What's your read on Brayden Schenn?
They like him. I believe he's on their radar. Trickier type of move given the term and the dollars that are tied to it. St. Louis is willing to listen on almost anybody right now. So the Blues have kind of let things be known that if you have interest in one of our players, we'll make a move. So whether it's Schenn, Kyrou on something bigger, Bushnevich has his extension kicking in July 1. He's out there. I know there's a lot of talk of Binnington for some reason, but he's got a substantial no trade. So we'll see kind of where that ends up going if anybody goes in that direction. But they're willing to listen on pretty much everybody, including Brayden Schenn. But yeah, he's got a few more years on that contract, in that $6 million range. So it's going to be tricky for Toronto to navigate that right now this season, unless there's retention, which I don't know really if that's something St. Louis is interested in. And B, just the acquisition cost for it. If Toronto's going to make a bigger splash, and this would be considered in the bigger splash category, they're going to have to give up one of their more prized young kids. And I think they're willing to do that, but I don't know necessarily if that's something that they're willing to do right now, because I don't know if they have the capability of pulling it off financially with the cap.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. I mean, I think you got to give up something, and you immediately go to some of their prospects they have coming down the barrel. Is that going to be enough, or does it have to be a piece off the roster? I have to think that Matthew Knies is absolutely untouchable. Who else do you think could be packaged in on this deal that could get something like this to over the hill?
Well, you're looking at the younger kids, right? So you're looking at either Fraser Minton, Easton Cowan, one of those guys. If you're making a bigger type splash, you're going to have to include one of those guys in the discussion. The first round pick next year, a lot of teams that are selling bigger pieces are looking at that because of how deep and how good the 2026 draft is projected to be. But barring that, you're looking at having to give up either a Minton or a Cowan or one of your top young kids in order to make a bigger splash. Now, we know Toronto's been very reluctant to do that in the past. I don't know how much of an appetite they have right now. I know some teams have asked about Minton specifically, but I don't know, like Philadelphia, for example, about a month ago, the Scott Laughton discussion reignited, and that really didn't get going anywhere because of, Fraser Minton being part of the ask. So I think Toronto's willing to go down that road, but you're looking at somebody from a substantial move. Is it a guy like Schenn? It's possible, but again, for a deal of that magnitude to go down, the assets are one thing, the cap is the other, and having to figure out how to navigate the cap right now, this season anyway, it can make things pretty difficult.
What the hell's going on with Mikko Rantanen? Like, is there a chance this guy's dealt again? And if that's the case, do you think the Leafs can get involved here?
Look, it's a tricky situation because they've made him the offer. Um, you know, 8 years in that 104 range. Um, it's up to him, obviously. To look, money's not necessarily the issue, and I do think Carolina came in a little lower than I anticipated right out of the gate. They understand where the number is going to be. It's going to be in between that $13 to $14 million range on an AAV. Maybe a team goes a little bit nuts and blows their load in the summer come July 1 and gives them more. But, obviously we don't know that right now. So, but from Carolina's perspective, it's not the money. This comes down to the player. And with everything going on, the whirlwind, the trade, the on the road, the Four Nations, etc. They just lost to Montreal last night. Like there's a lot going on for him to unpack. So it's going to come down to, and we knew this from the get-go, it's going to be his decision. Now, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to sign by the 7th, and it doesn't mean because of that Carolina won't trade him. But if the response is, I'm going to July 1, thank you for the offer, I'll consider it, you're at the top of my list, but I want to see what my options are, then I think Carolina pivots. Barring that, I think they're more likely to hold on to him. I think others have reported this as well. It's not like Carolina's going out there shopping the guy. Teams have called and said, hey, if you get to a point where you move him, please give us a call. I think Dallas is one of those teams. I think Tampa is another. Vegas certainly gets in on everybody. But you're looking at a $4.625 million player right now. If you want Carolina to eat some of that, or another team, you got to pay extra for that, and then go from there. But this is all, it's all nice. It's sexy to talk about because he's, one of the top guys. But the only way Carolina does it is if they feel he's going to July 1, and that significantly lowers or eliminates their chances of signing him.
I think whatever happens, there's going to be some raised eyebrows, which is kind of exciting. I want to pivot to John Tavares here.
Yep.
Any chance you think they get him done before the deadline? I think they've kind of tilted their hand to that. That's not the case. What do you see happening in the future with John as far as, will he extend? What kind of value is that at? Do you think there's any kind of chance of taking a discount? I've seen some numbers out there that it seemed kind of high to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at where things are at, a lot of people look back at the Joe Pavelski deal that he signed in Dallas, 3 times 7. That's kind of what I've been hearing hovering around Tavares. It could be lower. I'm expecting in that 6 to 7 range. And given where the cap is at and how it's increasing, for a guy who's, let's say he's not going to, hit 80 points over those 3 years, but if he's in the 65 to 75 range, for that type of money, that's going to be kind of going rate. And that might be a little bit on the low end to a certain extent by the end of that deal. I think there's an appetite, obviously, on both sides to get this done. I don't think there's been a rush because I think there's enough comfort there knowing that, this shouldn't be a long, arduous process. You're probably looking at something in the 3-year range, to get him locked in. And because of that, I think Toronto kind of is looking in other directions on how to improve the club and not having to worry about, number 91, because it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion, obviously, because it's not, pen to paper. But I think there's enough confidence there that he's going to stick around beyond this season.
What about Marner? Any update there?
No, not that I've heard. He obviously, there's no secret that he loves it here. He wants to be here, but at the same time, he wants to be in that market value type of environment. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to July 1, but a lot of what he's going to end up earning is not necessarily dependent, but it kind of aligns with what happens with Rantanen. These are going to be the two guys, as of now, headed for July 1, that are going to run the market. And, if Rantanen's getting 14, you can certainly argue that somewhere in the 13 range is market value for Mitch Marner. Is it the 13.25 that Austin's getting? Is it more? Is it closer to 14 if, somebody goes nuts for Rantanen and offers him above 14? All of those kind of factor in. But as of now, and this isn't going to be a situation that Colorado ended up going through and moving out Rantanen. I don't think that's part of the discussion at any point. But from a contract extension perspective, it's been relatively quiet. Maybe that's by design. Everybody's keeping a lid on it, but I haven't gotten the sense that they've really engaged in anything super serious.
What's interesting to me, just to tie a bow on this, is you look at the Rantanen situation. I wonder if the Marner camp looks at that and was like, if I go somewhere else, like the grass isn't necessarily greener, where you look at Rantanen in Carolina, there's no Nathan McKinnon around him anymore. Same for Matthews, or excuse me, same for Marner. You leave, there's no Matthews, there's no Nylander and others. And I wonder if that weighs into his decision long-term here.
It might. I mean, the teams that, if Marner hits the open market, some of the teams that I expect, to pursue him are teams like Chicago, and you've got Bedard. Teams like, Utah, and you've got some good pieces there with Keller and so on. I mean, there's going to be a long list of teams that are going to pursue Mitch Marner if he hits the open market. And some teams that have expressed some level of interest in the past, circle back to Vegas, they're all over the place, may have to make significant type of adjustments on their roster in order to accommodate. I don't foresee an environment where, especially if it's his decision, where he's not factoring that stuff in, where he's not going to look at a team and say, here's who I can play with, here's who I can make better, here's who can help my game. I think this makes more sense for me to go options A and B versus B and C and Toronto that's out there. Again, he loves it here. He wants to be here for life, but at the same time, a lot of different outside factors come in, and, dollars is a big one.
Dave, excellent stuff. I know you're going to be hosting this show coming up next Tuesday as we inch closer and closer to the trade deadline. Appreciate your time today.
You got it. See you, boys.
Thanks, Dave.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.